It's now 10:30. And we'll recognize any attendees who request to be recognized. Anyone online?
John Towsley.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the reports and approvals. We have some claims for approvals. Where are those? There they are. Any questions?
A motion to approve the claims for the payable register dated March 21, 2023.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Great. And we're ready for the director's report. So, Tori.
Great, thank you. Oh, wait. While we wait on Ken, previously we had approved a surveyor to survey the utilities along First Street as we prepare for any future improvements in the ZGA and the First Street Road realignment as it's proposed in the master plan for the ZGA. That survey work is complete and the engineer DPW has signed off on the work, and that's the Kuhn fee that you saw. That is the former proposal. So that project is closed and we have a lot of utilities in First Street. So it was kind of, I kind of joked with DPW and I said, well, are you ready for the next, Panama Canal project? Because it's going to be a major engineering feat. So this morning, I wanted to spend a little bit of time as we close out this quarter with learning and just take a revisit on Creekside. We have some business on Creekside later in the agenda. And so some of you are new. I'm new to the Creekside as well. So it was good for me to dive in. So Creekside was originally part of the 106th Street Zionsville Economic Development Area, which is in red. This red area is also generating TIF. What they did in this area is they pulled out Creekside. They pulled out 42 acres and developed this master plan for headquarters and offices. Of the 42 acres, only about half is developable. So there's ravines, parkland in there, trails, roads. So we've got 15 parcels to work approximately 21 acres. When you created Creekside, that was back in 2015, and it's hard to believe we're almost chasing up on a decade. When you sold the bonds, that starts a 25-year TIP date, and so your expiration of the Creekside obligations is 2040 from a TIF standpoint, and that's also the time when the TIF will expire and all of the revenue from the taxing will go to schools and all of the other taxing entities in the community. So let me walk through where we're at today. And I've got this map, and then I'll jump into some data, and then I'll talk about the agreements that are out there. Lot 6, which is the top black lot, that was the first lot sold. It was sold to DK Pierce, and thereafter, all of the other lots that you see in black have sold and are in progress. So hopefully you've seen RLR become up and operational. So you will see a full assessment of their property in pay 2024 for their AB. The lots 10 and 11 we'll talk about here in a little bit. Lot 9 is a little bit outside of the corporate Parkway area, and it is at the intersection of Dahlia and 106th Street. This parcel is just under 2 acres, or just over 2 acres, but it also has the Duke transmission lines running across it, and so there's a big easement which really inhibits parking on the western. Not parking, building on the western edge. It just limits it to only parking. And then as we get into the other lots up there on the north, we kind of have this breakdown, and I know there's a lot of colors up here, but we have lots 1, 2, and 3, and then 4 and 5, and 7 and 8 that are remaining. So lot 1 is the lot just north of 6 DK Pierce, and it's this long skinny lot acreage. And you know, when they drew the plot plan, that really accommodated the topography and preservation of trees. Sustainability was a big piece of what Creekside wanted to be and is today, because we continue to preserve as much as possible. So lot 1 has 2.5 acres. In 2020, the commission had 2 appraisals done independently, and we captured the appraised value for each of these lots. And you'll see that lot 1 is appraised at $620,000. This is land only in 2020. Lots 2 and 3, I'm gonna flip back, are just on the north side of the property, and they are long and skinny. Again, in order to make this usable, have a building footprint and parking, we will likely see and have seen a proposal to combine these 2 lots together. Those combined acreages are 4.5 acres. And then it would just run around just over $1 million appraised value. Lots 4 and 5 are in the northeast corner. This currently has access only off of lot 4 today. So we may see a proposal for a combination of lots 4 and 5. However, if lot 5 were to go, we have the capability to put in right away to get access back to lot 5. And the appraised value for lots 4 and 5 is 3, 6, 6.5 or $650,000 approximately, and 4.5 acres again. And then lots 7 and 8 are approximately 3 acres. They are unique because 8 has a ravine running through it. And so it really, it says it's at 1.3 acres, but it really is just under an acre of usable land. Because again, we want to preserve the storm drainage through there. And we're hovering around that $1 million mark for the appraised value of both of those. I want to make a note that the appraised value is different than the assessed value. And the assessed value is something that Boone County comes up with. That's what we pay our taxes on. The appraised value is what we have the capability to sell the land for. And by statute, we have to have a minimum offering of that amount when we first come out of the gate. Well, you did that 10 or probably in 2020 when you had this appraised value done. So we can accept offers less than that. And you'll see that in lots 10 and 11, the GRP lots, which are just under 10 acres, you'll see that appraised for $2.4 million. We did not sell that land for $2.4 million. But because it is a prime location, there at the intersection, it had a higher appraised value. So kind of moving along towards that concept of appraised versus assessed value, because assessed value is what we generate the TIF monies off of. And we have one other lot that I just want to highlight because I'm going to pull them out as I move on to the next slide. It's the group 1001 property. It's 16 acres and it's an outlier. And so I'll talk about them separately. So this slide shows the Creekside AV growth for the last 5 years. And what you'll see are the individual lots in the columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I pulled out 6 and 15 because they're outliers and it skewed my chart. So we'll see those in the next chart. But what you can see is that the assessed value is growing. The highest assessed value was in 2018 when we first came out of the gate, when there was a lot of momentum around Creekside. And then we had COVID and the assessed value fell because nobody was building headquarters or offices. And now we're climbing back up because we are generating momentum. It especially the whole corporate park will begin to climb in the AV because of the investment that RLR has made and GRP is making. These initial values also show that initial investment of DK Pierce and Group 1001, which initially was Lids. This next slide shows the other properties, and lot 15 is the Group 1001, where in 2022 we're seeing an assessed value of $17.3 million, and then lot 6 is DK Pierce of $2.3 million. So while we've had the dip through the COVID, you can see that we've recovered from a property value standpoint. Lots 12, 13, and 14 are the RLR properties. They have a 0 assessed value, basically. Not 0. They would say, of course, we're paying for our land. But this upcoming year, we will see a big jump because of their investment on the project. We've seen a lot of growth over the years. And I want to point this out. This slide was used by Crow in December when they gave their annual report, because the Creekside allocation area is a big part of the TIF revenues that the RDC receives and manages. So we started out in 2018, 9 million. The base assessment before you created the park was $1 million. So there's already a huge growth in our assessed value, especially as we continue to climb, because now we're approaching $10 million of incremental value. I wanted to just point this out. I mentioned that Creekside is a big part of it, and you'll see here Creekside in 2022 is just north of $9 million of revenues. Well, in the pink slide there, over the same 5-year span, our total TIF revenues was 11.5 million. So Creekside is very important for our financial strength, for our capability to reinvest in this area. In all of our TIF districts, we generated an incremental AV of $647 million. So that is the value of all of those properties as they continue to rise. And then again, once that TIF expires, all of this revenue then will go towards the Zionsville jurisdiction, the schools.
Corey, can I ask a question?
Yes,
Do you have a number of what the base is for all the TIF districts?
I, not on the top of my head,
Okay.
but to continue our learning exercises, and looking forward, next month, we're having a 5-year report from Crow. And in it, it will have the base for all of it, but we're also going to be looking at a 5-year projection going forward. So could I answer your question next month?
For sure. Yeah.
Thanks. We do have some outstanding debt obligations. All of these, bars, columns are getting funds from the Creekside TIF to pay the debt obligation. The first one was lease rental bonds back in 2012. And it was for new public infrastructure improvements to Bennett Parkway. This project is obligated by the entire 106th Street TIF. Remember the big red box that I showed you at the very beginning? This one. Okay, so this debt was taken on in 2012. In 2015, Creekside was created and pulled out, but the area was still obligated to pay towards that debt obligation. So while Creekside is its own TIF, it is a backstop for paying the 2012 bonds if the overall 106th Street TIF doesn't perform. There are specific bonds for Creekside itself, for the infrastructure, the road improvements, purchasing the land. That was done in 2016. The final payment for that is 2031. We have an outstanding payment of just under $5 million. That obligation is Creekside only. Then the final bond is the refunding of the lease rental bonds in 2017. And again, because this is Creekside was originally part of the 106th Street big area, it still is a backstop. So that's why I've included it. So we have 3 bond obligations that Creekside is tied to. And then for the Creekside parcels themselves, each of them have a tax rate. So in 2022, their tax rate was just over $2, and then less the school referendum, which is 39 cents. So the TIF tax rate that we're generating is 1.66. So for the public and for those that may not understand how TIF works, so we take the assessed value, of $9 million, and we multiply it by 1.66, and then that's the money that we receive annually to pay our debt obligations or make capital improvement projects or economic development efforts in that area.
That's 1.66 per $100 of net AV, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. We have one final agreement that Creekside is involved with, and it is with the school corporation. So the school corporation actually acquired this parcel, Lot G, which is not on the maps that you saw earlier as Lot G, but their parcel that they purchased was 9 acres. And they had originally purchased this property to put a warehouse there and a maintenance facility. They ended up selling this parcel to the commission for $3 million. And then they relocated the warehouse in a different location. The commission, for those Kent and Sanjay, you probably remember paying off that debt. I hope you did a whole high five at the end of that day. Pay off debt super early. You paid it off 10 years early. And in 2019, it was paid in full. So the debt pledge for this, goes. There's a TIF pledge, and then you had the land acquisition pledge. And you paid off your land acquisition pledge. But we also have a reoccurring agreement with the schools that I wanted to point out. And it's a semi-annual payment. We get our TIF revenues every time property taxes are paid. So in June and in December. So that's the semi-annual, June and December. So if we meet a certain threshold, we have to share 50% of that TIF revenue with the school corporation. And that threshold is our annual AV projection over our debt service needs to be 150%. So we need to be succeeding, like we will be, we will be. And then we also have to have $1 million balance in the allocation area. Right now, we're at about a $300,000 balance. So we've got a while until this payment is triggered, but this payment, should it move forward, is payable through 2029, February of 2029.
Corey, that's just for the specific lot that we.
It's just for. That's a good question. I don't think so. It's the entire Creekside area.
Okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
Yeah. No, it's the entire corporate park. It's not just this lot G.
Okay.
If that's what you're.
No, I thought it was Creekside.
Yeah, Creekside Corporate Park. Yeah. So we have had some movement in 2022 at the end of the year around lots 2 and 3. Then the economy went boom, and so we're quietly having conversations with interested parties. The planning staff takes calls and emails on a regular basis from interested parties. I'll make a phone call to them and just figure out what they want to be. Sometimes it's a distribution company, warehouse distribution, and that's not what we want in our corporate campus. But as we move along this year, hopefully we'll have some movements on some additional properties in Creekside, and we'll be able to continue to garner success. The other thing that I wanted to note in my my director's report is that we have the capability to ask questions as a redevelopment commission, and we own some land, and the town owns land. You may remember last year we did a public offering for what we call Lot 2. And I'm going to pull up a map. This is really hard to do. I'm looking at that screen. Okay. Here is Town Hall here, and Oak Street on the bottom of the screen. Lot 2 is this property here. The Redevelopment Commission owns this parcel, as did the Redevelopment Commission owned this parcel. The Redevelopment Commission sold this parcel to a group of doctors for the eye care businesses and financial services and the other offices in that building. So when we offered this property, we did not get any proposals. We had to wait statutorily 30 days before we had any conversations about this property. We are now outside of that 30-day window. And so I'm going to send this out basically to neighbors that have expressed interest in Lot 2, and to other development firms that I've done work with in the past, or development firms that I know are doing business in and around Zionsville, to see if we can't garner some more interest and open up, the phone line again. So basically this RFI is. Now I gotta get my mouse back over here. Oh, I don't even have it on the screen. Hang on. Okay. This RFI is in your packet and it was distributed to the public as well for a draft. And so I've made note here, the project description is to deliver a P3 project. P3 is public-private partnership. And I'm going to clarify this sentence because I did get feedback from someone in the public saying this is confusing. Why wouldn't you just sell the land? Well, we can just sell the land, but we're not going to sell the land for a parking lot. We want development there. We're a redevelopment commission. So, you know, we want offices and commercial activity, and then we want parking on site that meets that demand. We're basically saying, you know, give us your thoughts through the middle of May, and then starting in June, we can, you know, start evaluating how we want to proceed with 2. Now, the other area that I haven't drafted another RFI on is in the downtown area, Sycamore Street and First Street. This area is where we just had the utility line survey done. These parking lots right here are owned by the town of Zionsville, not Redevelopment Commission. Okay. There are 4 parcels individually. This is part of the Zionsville Gateway Master Plan. In their master plan, they have it labeled as Lot A. This idea of sending out a request for information is to get ideas, and it's not just developers, right? It can be anybody that has ideas on how this area, this parking lot should be used. It's an open call for ideas. So the public and interested developers can submit. Of course, this is just the beginning because town council certainly weighs in heavy on this because the town of Zionsville owns this, and we are just seeking ideas. So we are a convener in this lane versus we're a doer on the other lane. All right. So that concludes my TIF report and Creekside and RFIs. Do you have any questions for me? Okay, I'm gonna let you continue on.
Okay, thanks. Lori, appreciate it. We have the TIP area report that's in the packet, and it's I think the changes have been highlighted already for us. So if you guys have any particular questions, we can entertain those now. Otherwise, you can peruse at your leisure. Okay. Okay. So on to old business. Do we have any old business? Sorry. Okay. New business. Approval and adoption of the minutes from February. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Motion carries. 5-0. The CDC grant allocation. Back to you, Corey.
I wanted to just take a moment as we're getting into administering the RDC. One of the things that you approved in your budget is a $250,000 grant to the CDC. So prior to making that grant, I thought it would be good if the CDC could come and give a presentation to you on who they are and what they're working on. So Tammy is the vice president of the CDC, who's gonna give us a walkthrough.
Welcome, Tammy.
Oh, good morning. So, yeah, the ZCDC, so obviously we were formed to help the different businesses in Zionsville rehabilitate and repair properties within the TIF districts. And we started to do that a little bit when we were first formed, and then COVID hit, and so then we kind of switched modes, and we were more providing COVID relief for small businesses and grants and so forth, which obviously you guys are aware of. And so now, as the town is growing, as we are, trying to move forward and work in the best possible way for the town of Zionsville, we are transitioning to a different organizational 501c3. And with that, it just gives us more opportunities to help a broader base. But one of the things that I think as we go through this transition that would be really helpful for the ZCDC is to, instead of coming to the RDC every time we have an applicant that makes a request, and then they come to us and they go through their project, and then it goes to you guys, we thought it might make sense to streamline that process and ask the RDC to give us one lump sum once a year for the total $250,000. And then at the end of the year, on an annual basis, we can come to the RDC and give a report on exactly, who the funds went to, the different projects, what it helped for Zionsville. And we are in the process of updating our form request form, so that explains a lot more to applicants as far as if they know they're eligible or not, if they are within a TIF district, and kind of what the requirements would be to make them eligible before they go through the whole process. Let's see. I don't know if you have any questions or what your thoughts are.
I think it's more of a statement. So I think I asked Corey this yesterday, and just for clarification purposes, if the RDC does give a lump sum to the ZCDC, then you're bound by that TIF district that it comes out of. So just wanted to kind of note that,
Understand
A,
that,
for the
but
public, and B, for the
yeah, those dollars have
ZCDC.
to be spent within the TIF district. Yes, we understand that.
Okay.
Questions?
So would that mean that you guys are still gonna focus on the downtown? Is that the area that we would?
So that is that whole TIF, the whole corridor, but
Sure.
it seems like, the businesses and the projects that have come before us, have pretty much been in that, except for this one previous project came before us. Originally, the location was within the TIF, then they switched locations and didn't realize it until we realized that Room Village was not part of the TIF, and so we really couldn't proceed with that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Tammy. I just, money's coming in and coming out. So this was just an effort to, ask questions firsthand to an organization that money's going out. So
Do we need to make a motion to approve the?
you don't, because you have already approved it when you approve the overall budget.
Good.
Great. All right.
I'm just up here for your next agenda.
Okay, so we have Crow LLP contract.
Yeah. I do not have a contract yet, but I put it on the agenda, hoping to push some feathers along the path. So we will have a contract next month. So if you would kindly table it, and we'll move it to old business for next month.
And that's with respect to the Crow contract, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Is
so-
there, sorry,
Okay.
is there an expiration on their current contract? Or this is a renewal, I'm guessing?
There's not Well, it's unique because their current contract is actually with the administration. And so again, like you have done with Ice Miller last month, where we're breaking it out because you are an independent governing agency. So we're breaking out Crow's work with the RDC separately. And then
So is there a letter of engagement that has been in place with the administration, similar to how Ice Miller has, that we will be kind of adopting that and amending it
yes,
prospectively?
yes.
Is that something that we could look at, the letter of engagement with Crow?
Absolutely.
Prior to seeing a contract
Numbers?
proposal?
Yep, we sure can.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll put that on for old business next month. And we'll move on to other business. So lots 10 and 11, the closing presentation is on the agenda.
Brian, this is you. You want to get up?
Sure. So where we're this, I think we've all had discussions over the last several months with respect to where we're at with the Graham Rahal project on lots 10 and 11. And so we are now at the point where the project submittals that Graham was required to submit to the RDC and its representatives that process has been complete, and we have a closing timeline. So the submittals Graham's submittals comply with the detailed requirements of the development agreement. So everything that he was required to submit has been submitted, including confidential financial information regarding the expected revenue from the business and his financing plan. His financing plan, it's where actually we would expect it to be at this point in time. And that is First Internet Bank has issued a term sheet for the financing of the project. However, it has not been fully approved by First Internet Bank's lending committee. And that's pretty typical in the way any sort of development loan would proceed. That being said, since the other submissions are complete and Mr. Rahal's intention is to close by April 15th, which is a very tight time deadline. Instead of trying to schedule a special meeting very quickly at a time where we're going to lose a lot of people for spring break, it makes sense to consider his project submissions and then perhaps condition the RDC's approval on some things that we are quite confident will happen but have yet to happen. One of which, is final approval of the loan from First Internet Bank, which could be tomorrow, it could be next week. It just kind of depends on internally how things go with the bank. But we have had a very good communication from Graham's team with respect to the financing. So we would recommend, Corey and I would recommend that you condition your approval upon some sort of written confirmation from First Internet Bank once the loan has been approved. The construction loan has been approved at the committee level, and there's a date certain with respect to when the construction financing will close. So that's one issue with the financing, which is expected. One issue that was not expected, and we have worked on diligently with Graham's team for the last 2 weeks, is compliance with a likely condition of closing from First Internet Bank that is triggered by a series of federal regulations that went into effect 4 or 5 years ago with respect to commercial real estate loans, particularly commercial real estate loans that have low loan-to-value ratios that exceed 70%. They're called HVCRE regulations, high volatility commercial real estate loan regulations. It is not the world's best set of regulations. I have some experience with them, and I can tell you there's a lot of interpretation on what some of these requirements mean. And with respect to this particular scenario, where the land is essentially being contributed as a part of an economic development incentive, most banks feel that they cannot give credit for that equity slice or the value of that land the same day that the construction loan closes. So most banks are requiring that the land be transferred a couple days before closing, a day before closing, some even 2 weeks before closing. So banks are all over the place with respect to what they feel comfortable before they can give full value of the land, to the borrower. And in this case, I think it's something that's been discussed for quite some time, that one of the most significant values of the incentive is it does allow, Mr. Rahal, to use it in terms of his construction financing. So we've spent a decent amount of time in the last 2 weeks working with Mr. Rahal and his representatives, and it's highly likely that the land will have to be transferred to Mr. Rahal before the construction financing closes. Which, as long as we have a written commitment from First Internet Bank that yes, we are closing and this is the date that we're closing and we need you to transfer land on this date, then we would feel comfortable with proceeding with the transaction. Right now, we have it set up in the resolution that we prepared for you that that time period cannot exceed 48 hours. And we had been told by Mr. Rahal's representatives that First Internet Bank had verbally committed to that. I spoke with Mr. Rahal's representatives last night to discuss kind of where we're at, particularly with respect to the financing. And he started getting a little nervous about the 48-hour period because, nothing's in writing yet. And the loan has not been through committee. And I think there's a couple of you all that have some pretty significant banking experiences. So you know that sometimes in committee certain things like that can change, even if the fundamentals of the loan won't. And there's no indication that the fundamentals of the financial deal will, but perhaps somebody will want a couple more days. So you have the option of pushing that date out, or we could, hold their feet to the fire to the 48 days and remind the bank that that's verbally what they said to 48 hours, sorry, not 48 days, sorry, 48 hours. So, I mean, that's a viable option to hold the First Internet Bank's feet to the fire on at least what they told Mr. Rahal's representatives. Or you could decide that you would you'll give more grace and more time to work with. So that would be condition number 2. And then there is a third condition, and I think Zach can speak more to this, but Mr. Rahal's design folks have not fully satisfied the planning commission's design requests. So I will pass off the battalion to Zach.
So yeah, I mean, some of you are already aware, but they've gone through plan commission approval and they were given conditional approval at their February meeting. The conditions were mainly focused on the facades. They wanted some redesign associated with them. This is their site plan that they proposed. Just looking, some of you are already familiar with some of these drawings, seeing them before, but they have been redesigned slightly. But this is their main building that will hold GRP, their coffee shop, and Ducati. Just showing you some imagery of what they have proposed and what they have requested to be redesigned. So this is looking for, from the sidewalk on 106th Street North. So this is the southwest side. And then we have, this is the Ducati building. This is going to be closer to the intersection. But they felt that there would just needed to be some redesign. It's been pushed to a committee. That committee will have to be noticed and will be the discussion will be in a public forum. They just have not received any new materials, so they can't schedule that committee meeting at this time. Then looking at their second building, which is going to host the museum, and then some additional retail space. So this is just some mock. I don't believe any of these businesses are locked or said that they would be occupying the space. I believe it's all open right now, but they're just showing some examples of how signage could be displayed on the structure currently. And then this would be the restaurant. So they do have a restaurant in the structure. It will be on the southwest side of the secondary building that's on the corner of Creekway and 106th. if you have some specific questions, I can go over that.
Is that the the plan commission's issues with I guess it's just the signage? Is that what the problem was?
So it's not just the signage, it's the facades themselves. They felt like I can't speak to exactly their words as I wasn't in the meeting or part of that discussion, but I believe they wanted them to be amplified to a degree. They felt like it was a little just a flat facade. They wanted them to be amped up a little bit. I think in previous iterations, the Ducati, I mean, some of you remember the original design that they had. It feels like they scaled it back quite a bit and it's not as robust as the original one. But they're just hoping to see some redesign and maybe, so we'll see what they come up with.
And so the committee that the plan commission, and I'm just trying to think of, approval that we would do. Because we have to base our approval on that happening, right? We have to, the plan commission has to approve their design work before we can transfer the land to them. Is that correct?
I'm kind of on the fence. This is a question for you. They may actually, do they have to get plan commission approval? Because technically they actually had to get your sign off before they could even go to plan commission because they don't own the land yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so our development agreement says that we have final approval and of the design. And so instead of adding another layer of design review, what we're proposing is that they have that final design approval from the plan commission that basically acts as your approval.
Okay. That's what I was driving at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the development agreement contemplates that those are two parallel processes, and so it's not. It didn't fully delegate your authority to approve to the planning commission, but it does contemplate that the design is going to be approved by the planning commission.
Is any of this tied to his closing on the property with the lending, the commercial lending? So what I'm asking is, I mean, if we make a decision today, conditional approval, I mean, aren't we essentially boxing the planning committee in or the planning commission in to make a decision on the design?
Well, we're boxing the developer in to submit something, but yes, we're saying that they've got to get approval. I mean, the architectural subcommittee, is made up of experts and volunteers that review these documents all the time. But yes, we are saying that.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, we're respecting the planning commissions. I mean, at least the way that we have the resolution drafted that Corey and I worked on for your consideration. It actually respects their decision making that, hey, we may be conditionally okay with all of this, but we're not okay with it unless you make the planning commission and subcommittee happy and comply with the requirements that they have communicated. So,
And the timing on the 48 hours or whatever we decide on that doesn't go in effect until the letter comes from the bank, correct?
they're kind of independent because I mean, look, the bank could approve the loan tomorrow and say, look, but we still have, everybody still has all these other things to do. So we were going to close we were going to close the construction loan on the 15th, thus we need the land in by the 13th. So they're really kind of independent, but likely it's all going to probably happen pretty close together. That's typically the way it's.
But it's a little open-ended in that, I mean, once I guess in my mind, I'm like 48 hours doesn't start until those other things happen.
Yeah, probably. And the 48-hour clock's going to start from, they are going to tell us we're closing on this date. And then that's when we've made that extraordinarily clear. Like we have to have something in writing from First Internet Bank that this is the day that we're funding, and so we would rather them tell us as close to the time as possible. And we're ready for closing. We have all the closing documents drafted, they're finalized. We're in execution mode after today. So it would be better for them to give us, 48 hours or 72 hours notices that's what they want to do, because there's a lot more certainty with respect to the closing date. But that could happen over spring break. We want to be prepared for that in case that's how this plays out.
I've put up on the screen, Brian diligently put together this resolution and I failed to print it. So I've asked Zach to print it for you then. But basically the resolution states that the commission approves the project to close with the 3 conditions that we've reviewed and having the time frame, the 2-day time frame. And I can,
So the architectural committee, will they be meeting over spring break? Because if you look at the timeline and when they have to close, you're talking about the week of spring break.
I don't know when, again, they haven't received drawings. So they're not going to schedule until the developer receives the drawings. So it's, I mean, the development team has 2 arms, right? We have 3 arms, right? You got the legal, the financial, and the design. So the design is one arm that is a commitment to the RDC and the town to have great design. And then financially, they want to close and start moving this towards construction, but they can't do that anyways without the design. So you kind of have this push and pull of trying to establish a closing date. But we've got to get those all working in the same circle.
I mean, the truth about development work, if you look behind the curtain, is there's all kinds of chaos that happens, behind the scenes, and trying to put all kinds of, several different work streams together, including the financing, and then get to close. And, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's easier. I'd say this is probably somewhere in the middle. From what I've seen, I think their design professionals are doing a good and diligent job. Like they're maybe probably more so than usual. Graham has a very effective legal counsel. Barnes and Thornburg and Don Williams have been great to work with. They've been proactive in solving issues. But Graham's team, they don't develop commercial real estate. This is a project for their business. So they've been really focused on the business requirements of the project, which I think they've been far better than most developers, but then kind of, a developer is going to know how to coordinate this more because they do it all the time. And so sometimes I think there's just the left hand sometimes doesn't really talk to the right hand, but overall, I see nothing about this process that I wouldn't expect. And, in many ways, this part of the process with the Ray Hall team has been better than some other projects.
So
That'll actually a lot of other projects. They've been pretty good with it.
if we approve this resolution, there's no timeline that the RDC is blocking anybody in on, right? It only goes into effect once the documents or once everything starts moving forward, correct?
Yes, sir. The developer is in full control of the timeline. We are acting as the organizing party, and we need to protect our investment. You saw, $2.4 million of appraised value into this property. And so we want both. We want your lending approved and we want your design approved. It's not or, it is.
But this resolution also gives them a plan to be able to do all that without waiting on us to do anything. Correct?
Yes.
Brent, was the discomfort about the 48 hours because it was too short a timeline or too long a timeline?
So last night, Mr. Ailes' representatives were concerned that they might need more time in, maybe 72 hours or 128 hours. And so what happens if that's the case? You have to go back to the RDC. And I said, well, yeah, yes, right now, the way the resolution is drafted, you'd have to go back to the RDC, but let's work towards 48 hours because you've got verbal indication that 48 hours is enough. My concern with giving them more time, and this is up to you, but this is not the specific project or this specific issue. This is just the way development work goes. If you extend deadlines, then the deadlines get it, or the possibility of the deadline getting extended, then everybody takes more time. And the more successful developers understand that. So they'll often set very aggressive development deadlines, even if the back of their head, they know we're not likely to hit all of these. Because they know if they don't set aggressive deadlines, then they're going to still get jammed up with the same sort of issues, except for the project timeline extends. So.
But this is just the conveyance of the property so that they can secure the loan for the closing date. So they're in full control of the time frame once this resolution is adopted, that they then know once lending committee approves that we need a letter, an approval letter from the bank stating that. And then they have that full timeline up to 2 days prior to closing to secure approval by the plan commission of their design.
Yes.
That's how I read. Okay.
Okay,
And if you want to make any further conditions or modifications to the resolution that we've drafted, I've got it right up on the system right here, and we can make the changes immediately.
Brian, just for clarification, is it actually a resolution or is it just an approval?
Well, it's actually, that's a good point. I mean, we talked, it really is just an approval. I mean, there's no resolution needed to officially approve
Right.
anything with respect to this project. This is a discretionary approval that we negotiated on your behalf in the development agreement, which is, which is appropriate given the fact that few developers would be able to purchase or commit to purchasing a lot at Creekside and having the level of I can't pronounce them. Without the level of detail that you all would necessarily want to see before conveying the property. Few developers would commit this amount of money it would take to generate the information that you would want to see before the RDC would be committed to conveying the property. Because it costs money to generate to generate these plans and budgets and to work with the bank. So it's a considerable investment on the part of the developer.
Okay, so I think we would make a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve the RFPDI LLC's project plans. And I'm not sure if that's what we're calling it, but
Are we going to call this resolution 2 of 2023? I mean, is it a resolution or are we just?
It's just a written approval. It's not it's not a resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that was my mistake. I was mixing and matching words. This is simply a discretionary approval. There's nothing statutory about this. This is a contractual right that you have.
all right, so I'll just read it as is. I'll make a motion to approve the Zionsville Redevelopment Commission's approval of RFPDI LLC's project plans.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carried. And as long as there's nothing else, then meeting's adjourned.